Thank you all for tuning in to have this conversation, this very important conversation. I'm Imani Jones, the Commissioner of Diversity Affairs. And firstly, I want to go around and do introductions so we know who everyone is, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So Trevor, could you introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah. My name is Trevor Guthrie, and I'm the president of the Associated Students.
Hey, my name is Vila Pimasuk, and I also sit on the Diversity Affairs Council.
Hi, I'm Yamile Bayi. I am a program coordinator at the CCLC, and I also co-advise the Diversity Action Council.
Hey guys, I'm Freya Laguna. I also sit on the Diversity Affairs Council, but I'm also public relations for the Filipino American Student Organization.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Crystal. I am the assistant director with the Cross Cultural Leadership Center.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all for tuning in today. So this conversation is important because during these trying times, we know that racism has shook. Oh my goodness. I think it's even worse because it's being recorded. So I'll be natural with this.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Okay, so well, today we're having this meeting because we really want to support our students of Asian descent, or just the API students here at Chico, and let them know that we support them in these trying times, because as we know, racism has definitely targeted their community heavily, and we want to reach out and find ways we can support them and stand in solidarity with them. And it's important that we hear their voices, and maybe a few people today here can speak for some of their friends, their experiences, and what they might be going through, and just how I, as a commissioner, and Trevor as president, and any like pro staff can help these students through these trying times. So, Trevor, did you have anything to say?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly.
Okay, thank you. All right. So firstly, I would just like to say that, like, as the Commissioner of Diversity Affairs, and I think I speak for AS too, that we denounce racism towards anyone, and especially now, where, as you know, Donald Trump has outwardly spoken, kind of not. He's used terminology that have targeted community, or the Asian community, and have, I don't know if you all know, but people in the United States have been like, how do you say this? They've been, how do you say this? Oh my goodness, this is terrible.
We're good, Imani.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're great.
Okay. Well, anyways, I've read that violence towards people of Asian descent, or the Asian community, has skyrocketed, and that ever since, especially Donald Trump called it the coronavirus. So there's just been like miseducation and violence towards people. And so I just kind of want to say that we denounce that, and that we do not support that here at Chico. It's important for our students to know and understand that that's not what we stand by, and if anything, we want to support our students, or just people in general who are going through that, especially during these times. So does anyone else want to add anything to that? Maybe? No?
Yeah, I think it's important to bring this issue up because we don't want it to escalate to the point where we're seeing it as being normalized. I think just taking any type of preventative measures or type of containment measures to hopefully mitigate this type of stuff, so that I guess we're not seeing too much of an increase. Because we did see this with, I would say, kind of like the Islam community, where after sort of like 9/11, they're kind of being used as like the scapegoat, and now Islamophobia is such a huge thing. So it's very important to try to mitigate this as much as we can.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So one of the things I kind of wanted to ask right off the bat is like what are ways that we can support our students who are dealing with this or just might be afraid that they might have to deal with like violence and things towards them. I know that one of the topics last time that we talked about in our Zoom was that students were like afraid to go out because they might be discriminated against. And so wanted to figure out ways where we can help the students know that they have support from us and like what can we do to be there for our students.
One of the things that I've seen that I really like is a lot of departments have created like graphics sort of calling out the anti-Asian racism that's around. And since most of us are really communicating virtually now, I mean, I think those are nice symbols of like, we acknowledge that this is a problem, this is real, this is not in your head, you're not crazy, this is a real thing, which I think sometimes broader society or certain fractions of society will try to kind of undermine that this is someone's legitimate experience. So I think affirming people that, you know, this is what's happening to you and we believe you. And then maybe putting out symbols of like some kind of message that says, this is not appropriate, this is not right, this is wrong. And we as an entity or an office or whatever we are, we stand against this and we stand with you. I think those visual representations can be really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Hales from AS, is it marketing?
Yeah.
Marketing, right? Okay, AS marketing, she actually reached out to our council to do like a campaign, a visual campaign denouncing like racism to like the Asian community in these times. So I think that's one of the ways, but like you said, there could be there definitely can be more, and so we do want to figure out ways in which we can do that.
One of the things that we talked about in the council meeting, so I also am the president of our Asian Pacific Islander Council at Chico State for our faculty and staff. And one of the things that we talked about specifically were our international students. You know, this is a second home to them, and for a lot of them, they couldn't go home. And so we've been contacting the Maihua, who is our past president, and myself. We've been in contact with the Office of International Engagement or International Education and Global Engagement and their study abroad program, because one of the things that we look at is racism looks different in every country, right? And so every country has a kind of its own way of managing or manifesting what that looks like. And in the United States, I think a lot of our Asian students, there's this myth that that Asian population is that model minority, right? That they don't face discrimination or they don't face these challenges. And one of the things that we recognize, our international students don't know how to navigate this in the context to American culture. And so one of the things that we've been doing is looking at ways to support them, offering to bring donations to the Hungry Wildcat Pantry, and just ways that'll connect them to food and people and connections, even though they're so far from home. And so we talked about our international students. But I think the hardest part really is to say, like, just to listen and say, what do our students need? Some of them right now, the biggest issue is like the fear of going out. Some of them, it's just navigating culture at home. And so I think my thing is always to go to like, let's talk about you and your individual needs first, and then how do we then expand that out to something systemic or sustainable that we can do to help support students throughout this? Because we know that it's not going to end at the end of this academic year, right? We got like 5 more weeks of the school year, but we know that it's going to go into summer when we're not in session. It's going to go into the fall semester, and I'm thinking about, well, what happens to the students who are experiencing this when they go out? You know, this concept of coughing while Asian, or the fear that comes with it. You know, how do we help students navigate that? And I think that's a hard question to ask. And I think, you know, the only ones that can answer that are our students. And saying, like, what would you need if you were in need as a student?
I think that's a good point. You know, are we asking the population that's most vulnerable, how can we support you? What do you need? How would how can I help you? I mean, and it's difficult because if we could go to the store together, that would be one thing, but we can't. We're all isolated from one another. So how can we, given the situation, support you during this time?
So a big part of it is just like reaching out to students and understanding where they are. Have we worked on like a survey or like something that could get we can get in contact with our students and ask them personally what's going on with them? Like, is that are we doing that already? No?
I know
So.
we aren't doing necessarily a survey, but I know we talked with and did some targeted marketing with folks to get them together in a private session, just to share about their feelings and emotions. And so I don't think we've done a survey. That might be a good idea, just to send it out there and see kind of what we get and how we can support. Is that something that would come out of DAC, the diversity?
Yeah.
I think that'd be awesome. And we got a good listserv as well with students. So just let us know and we can help push it out. And I know we have FOSO represented. And so maybe we can help push it out through our different connections.
Okay, thank you. And then like, is anyone here, do they have any frustrations or anything that they would like to share? Don't want to force anyone to share anything that they don't want to, but is there any frustrations that you could share here and you'd be comfortable sharing? Okay. And then I also want to talk about like the resources for students, like knowing about these resources, because I know that there's like a $500 emergency grant that's going around. I don't think a lot of people know about that. And then recently, there's the Trevor, can you help me out? It's like the drop, like you could drop your classes and not have to worry about, or something like that. What was it?
So on the Academic Senate right now, we're exploring kind of different ways we can support students academically with all this going on. And so something that a lot of colleges and universities are doing across the nation is kind of the credit, no credit option. So it's not necessarily dropping a class, but they're just being much more lenient on those kinds of requests. But something specifically is looking at whether or not students can opt into credit or no credit for each class, kind of depending upon where they're at and the varied effects that this pandemic has had on people. And so we're really doing our due diligence, working it through multiple committees within the Senate and getting a lot of feedback from stakeholders, including students, administration, staff, and everyone who's going to be affected by this. So I think we're reconvening on Thursday in Senate to kind of work out the kinks of it. But this is certainly a far sweeping policy and it's going to affect every student differently. So it's going to be challenging to ensure that our students know what exactly it means to take a credit or no credit for classes. It could potentially impact, I'm not sure what the findings are, of like veteran status, financial aid, grad school. There's just a myriad of things that it's going to affect. So we're really just making sure that we're looking at every kind of option and going from there. We have offered some other kind of alternatives to this grading system. So we've discussed at length many different options, but we really just want to make sure we can find one that's going to meet the needs of our varied students.
Yeah, thank you for that, Trevor.
Did we lose Amani? Oh, there she is. Okay.
Sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I think after a certain point, students can't be responsible for their their financial aid or something like that. They don't have to pay it back if it's after like the census, I believe.
Yeah. After week 6, it's the financial aid census. So the after week 4 you can't drop. After week 6 they do a financial aid census. I think right now we're just in unprecedented times, and so one of the things that we're looking at really focusing on, how do you support students? And so we're encouraging students not to withdraw, but to talk with faculty, since everyone is going to be looking at this, right? So seniors who are getting ready to go to grad school, high school seniors who are getting ready to come to college, like all of those aspects, transfer students who are getting ready to transfer in, who need those credits. And so there are some folks who can go credit, no credit, credit. Some folks, because of scholarships, need the ABC no credit. And the great thing is that I feel like, you know, Chico State has done an incredible job in tuning into, okay, what are the needs of the students? Let's get student input on this and student voice on this, and being able to say, like, how do we navigate this, since there's literally no precedent to help us and say, well, this is what they did last time. There was no last time in this kind of a context with higher ed and this globally. So I think everyone's being proactive in supporting students and figuring that out. And I know that especially in academic advising, in the Office of the Registrar, in financial aid, folks are always willing to kind of look at what's in the interest of our students while still maintaining you know, the things that need to be maintained. And so the good thing is there's going to be things that are going to be held off so it doesn't impact students so heavily, given that this came to us literally right before spring break.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the main things I wanted to like talk about here is just like the resources for the students, because I don't think a lot of students know about the resources, and maybe just looking it over, not really understanding. And so like maybe talking about those resources like we are today, and making sure that they can hear verbally, or us verbally, them. Auditorial, is that a word?
Verbalize? Verbalize, is that what you meant?
Auditory learners.
Well, just know that they have, you know, resources here, and that we're supporting them.
And I
How
think,
would students be able to access that?
Yeah. Well, so like the majority of information I find out obviously is because I'm in AS, and so that helps a lot. Also, I know some faculty have information on it. They've emailed me a lot about it, and so because I've kind of communicated with them a little more. I'm afraid that some students are not communicating with their professors and talking about these things, so they really don't know about their resources. Possibly, like, Trevor, do we have a page, don't we, where we talk about resources or something like that?
So we have our virtual engagement center on the AS website. And at the top of that, there's of course a banner that will take you to the Chico State COVID-19 resources. And there's a comprehensive list of everything you need. There's frequently asked questions on that website. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. You can go in there and kind of figure out what you need and who you can talk to. And then of course, I think a resource that a lot of students don't think of at first to answer their questions is if you just go on the directory and you can look up any department that you may need information from. So, you know, if you need advising but you don't know who to talk to, your first step would be, you know, contacting the advising department and seeing kind of who they can connect you with. And that can be found on the directory. So anything that is missed on that comprehensive resource list, I think can still be found on the directory. And then of course, if you don't know where you need to go, I'm sure, you know, every department is here to support students. So you can contact literally anyone and say, hey, this is what I need, and they can connect you with the right people.
And this information is being pushed out to our student body, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is maybe students might think they have to do everything on their own right now, because like everything is virtual now. So I mean, that's kind of what I took on, like the attitude I took on was like, oh my God, like everything I have to do on my own now. I don't know what to do. And so I was kind of quiet, trying to figure out things, because that's all I've ever done. And especially like in communities of color, that's all anyone has ever done, is just figure out, you know what I mean, what to do on their own. So
you gotta figure it out, gotta take it.
Exactly. So but it's been helpful to have, because a lot of faculty actually, like my professors, have reached out to me. They're like, Imani, like, what's going on? This and that. So I think it's important to push out, like, you know, the resources are there, the help is there, but you do have to, you know, reach out, you know, to get the help too.
Yeah, do your own due diligence, right?
Yeah, I think too, those students sometimes are a little overwhelmed by everything. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot of information out there, and everybody is pushing out something different. You know what I mean? And so you have to kind of sift through like this glut almost of information that's going out. And so I think that's something to also keep in mind that students, it's a lot, like all this is a lot, you know what I mean, for people. And so also to be mindful of that, like how can, in the sea, because every department, everyone is putting out information right now, like in the sea of this like overwhelming amount of information, how can we help students to get the stuff that's the most important to them right now and maybe the most relevant for them?
Absolutely.
Well, and I think too, just remembering that I think a lot of times our students forget how strong and resilient they are, because like, I mean, I can't imagine taking 5 or 6 classes online and transitioning. So that pressure is hard, like, and I think it's important to acknowledge it. And I think especially when it comes to our API communities, the culture piece of it, you don't ask for help, you don't burden anybody else with your issues, you don't tell them that you need anything, you really kind of wait and say like, all right, what can I figure out? One, there's a lot of things that you can figure out on your own, but 2, that you don't have to, and I think that's the biggest thing is, Trevor's right. You can go on our directory. You can type literally anything in: admissions, academic advising, financial aid, STAR Center, CCLC, and you'll connect to us and we will help you in that process. But I think the most important thing is to also recognize, like, even if you have no clue who to turn to, AS government has a website. Imani is our commissioner of diversity affairs. Trevor is our president. Trevor, you're like right next to me. Sorry, I'm pointing this way. Trevor is our president. Both of you as students, you sit on diversity affairs council. I got a chance to sit on it when I was a student. And I think that's just an opportunity to get connected. And we know that culturally, especially for our local students who maybe commute to work or commute to school, we know that they still live with family. And so that not a lot of them are not going to have sometimes the time or the ability to reach out, but that the help is here. And I do know that even though there's a lot of information getting pushed out there, we're all trying to be on the same page with all of this. And so we're all kind of keep going into like, check out these resources, check out the websites, all of these frequently asked questions is out there. And we're all learning together. I think the biggest thing is to give yourself some grace, give yourself the ability to breathe and to recognize that for right now, the world is a little different. And the racism and the xenophobia that exists right now has always existed under other different methods, right? The model minority myth, yellow scare. We know that, in the United States, we had the Japanese internment camps. Like, we know that these things have always existed. And so it's important to recognize that in these moments, we've got to come together to find those spaces so that if you do experience something, right? And our hope is that you don't. But if you do experience something, who can you turn to? You got your Commissioner of Diversity Affairs, you got the Cross-Cultural Leadership Center, you have your president of AS government, you have all of these entities that are more than happy to jump in and support, and the Asian Pacific Islander Council on campus. We got FASA, we got HSA, we got a lot of different outlets, and I think what's important is to tap back into that, to recognize and acknowledge your own personal resilience, acknowledge that there are going to be cultural barriers and some challenges in that, but that in that we can come together to support through all of this to get you the resources and information that you need. And I know that we do the best that we can to send out to the folks that are involved in the CCLC. But we also know that there are people that are not connected, and those are the students that honestly, like, that I'm more fearful for, is the students that don't have a faculty member, don't have a staff member, don't have a center or a space that they can connect to, not because they don't want to, but because they may not know of it. And I think we work hard each year to try and get as much of that information as we can out there, and acknowledging as well that it's, some people's priorities is, I have to go home and take care of family. I have to go home and take care of my elders. I have to go home and take care of siblings. And we have to be able to value those as well as staying connected and getting involved on campus.
Well said, Crystal. No, well said. Well said. Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything?
I do want actually to talk about this just because I know, like, with the whole Chinese virus and all that stuff, I do believe that there are people that are in denial about the whole situation, and they're like, oh yeah, it came from China, but that's not really like the virus itself. but I do want to talk about like personal, like the interactions that I've had, and I do want to show like that this is a real thing. My cousin who worked at In-N-Out, the person that he was serving talked to his manager and said that my cousin to tell him, this Chinese guy, to wear a mask or to cover his face. And that's just something like someone so close to me, like that actually happened. And as well as friends who like reached out to me, they said, just be careful going out because, you know, they hate Asians. And it's like, I think that we all, like, as you guys said, like, we do need to now acknowledge the fact that this is actually happening and, like, you know, to stay united and to reach out to other students to make sure, like, if they're okay. Like, of course, like, there's also academics, like the frustration of, like, oh, like, we have a lot of school going on and all the stuff, but there's also, like, personal things, too. So I just wanted to shed light, like, this is really, like, actually happening. And I've had, like, personal, like, interactions with, like, my own personal friends and like all that stuff. So just wanted to share that out.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's so tough, you know, when we hear these stories, because we, you know, if you go on any social media, and you can search up some of these stories and these challenges, and I think what is fearful is that people then chalk these stories up to sensationalize, right? People are like, oh, well, they're just saying that because they want to be included in these stories. When in reality, like, these are specifically targeting, right, our Asian communities. And we see that happen in a lot of different forms where even the context of when we look at like Black Lives Matter and we look at our immigrant rights and looking at DACA and looking at some of the other populations, the hardest thing that comes out is that people now are saying, well, it all comes from China. So anyone from Chinese extent or descent has it in their DNA or has it in their bloodline. And that's just not factually true. You know, China actually was the one who identified the strand COVID-19, right? And so they identified it in December, and we were notified about it in January. But the challenge is that, like, with all of this happening, these are real experiences. The fact that you are singled out as a single Asian person working at In-N-Out to have that specifically say you need to wear a mask and go to the higher ups, like that is impactful. That makes you feel devalued, makes you feel dehuman, and makes you feel like you are less than. And I think that's the hardest part, is how do we then support people who are going through that without physically bringing folks together, you know? And so those are the hardest stories to hear. So thank you, Freya. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
I think, like, an important thing to say is that, like, one thing I've learned, you know, I can only speak from my experiences, is that I can't control racist people or racism at all. It affects me deeply, but I can't even control it. And I think that's the part that hurts the most, is like when you have someone who's close to you go through that, and you're like, you know this person very well, you know that they're a good person, you know, you just know, and these things still happen to them. I think that's the worst thing that can happen. The only thing I can say is, like, just the support, you know what I mean, and like throwing away the ignorance, because I think a lot of it is ignorance. Some people are being racist and they don't even know it. Just saying, like, Chinese virus, like, you're racist for doing that. You know what I mean? Because there's a scientific term for it. You know what I mean? It doesn't even take anything from you to call it by its scientific name. And so that's why I think this is the point of this conversation too, is to speak firmly that we do not support ignorance. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't support the ignorance, and period. So, and letting students know that we support them and that we're here for them, you know what I mean? We can't control outside forces, but we can control how we approach a situation, how we can help. So just knowing that there are people out there who can understand from a different point of view, but still can understand and support you is important. And I know, Krista, you said earlier you were going to talk about doing like a personal kind of. Okay, then that's one way students can come together and talk about these things. I know that when like that shooter thing went down, Just Unity Sisters held like a group, and like we just was very vulnerable with one another. We were crying and things like that, but it felt good because, like you said earlier, we felt affirmed by our emotions and like what was going on, and it felt like we had support in each other. So I think that's a really good idea, and you know, I'll be reaching out to students, encouraging them to participate, you know what I mean, and hopefully that they do, and hopefully they can see from here that, you know, we support them and that, you know, we want to try and do whatever we can do to help them, especially through these crazy times, very unprecedented times. So, yes. Is there anything else anyone want to add?
I think
it's so hard to. Oh, my bad.
But
I was saying that it's so hard to watch from afar. About this whole thing escalating. I've never experienced any type of racism that, at least I don't think, that deals with the whole coronavirus pandemic. But I never really understood how serious it was. The whole Asian racism type stuff. Because my mom was texting me and she was like, "Oh, just be careful when you're going outside and stuff like that, you know." And then I was like, "Okay, yeah, like it's really not that big of a deal." But then like I didn't even realize that during these times when I'm here in California studying, but my parents back in Michigan, like my father actually experienced some form of racism. Like he was just out at a laundromat just doing laundry. And then I guess he had noticed that there was somebody waiting outside for him. And I guess apparently for like 2 hours. And my dad would not step outside just because this person was waiting outside, like right outside their vehicle. And so it was like, I think he observed him for like 2 hours until he finally left. And it's super frustrating because it's like my dad doesn't even look Chinese, like at all, like Chinese, like, you know, I guess. But it's super ridiculous because even if you have like a hint of like you appearing Asian or anything like that, you automatically become sort of like a victim. And it's super upsetting. Like, what's the point of this racism towards Asian people? Like, what does it do to you? Like, what does that solve? And it's even more frustrating to know that it's like, here we are in America, and then we're scapegoating the Asian community. But regardless of race, this coronavirus doesn't stop for anybody. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just had a vent because it's like it's happening to my own father, and it's just like that's a hardworking man. Like he's never done anybody wrong. Like you know, he's just taking care of his laundry.
Yeah, when it impacts our parents, you know, and when it impacts elders and it impacts people where you're like, wait. Like I get that could happen to me, but for it to happen to my parents, like it's up, you know, and I think that in that space, like it's also tough to be so far away. So I'm sorry that had to happen.
Me too. It sucks, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation because we've really been talking about that a lot, about how do we come together, even just to vent about these incidences that we hear that other people are experiencing, because I think one of the things that'll happen is like, oh, we'll hear a story, but then it's not real until it happens to us, right? And I think the acknowledgement also that as these experiences come out, that a lot of times people are being invalidated for that. And so it's like, well, for your father or for your cousin who works at In-N-Out, it's like, these are real people that are having to fear. And I think that the controversy, and I know one of the controversies that I saw online was that the API voice or the Asian voice is often invisible in the fight for social justice. And so a lot of folks are coming back and saying, well, why should we support the Asian community when the Asian community has never stood in solidarity with some of the other racial justice challenges? And what we say is that the API community is there. They just practice activism a little differently than a lot of the other extroverted rallying, protesting kind of voices. But the API community is a part of the social justice voice, and we're in all of this for justice and all of this for equity. It's about human rights, right? And acknowledging that even if your father was from China, that doesn't give reason to say, oh, well, he is Chinese, even if he's
Right.
okay, let's say he is Chinese. Does that give you the right to devalue him? Does that give you the right to put your own realities or expectations on him? And does that give you the right to terrorize or to hurt people? And I think we've heard that a lot of whether they're experiencing this, even if they're not Chinese. And what I want to push our narrative towards is like it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care where you come from, what country you originate. This is a global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like right now, my island where I come from is safe. Like we have no cases. I don't know if that has to do with testing or all that other stuff, but like there are very few small places that don't have any, but it's a global pandemic. And so it shouldn't matter if you're from China or from anywhere. The assumption that only Asian folks have this is the misconception and the ignorance that people are living in. And that's the ignorance we have to address. It's not about that, right? And that racism, like when we talked about too, even the hashtag of like racism is the virus, and we need to battle that as a virus. And it's tough because then how do you support someone from so far without and all you have right now is virtually. And I think that's the toughest part.
Mm.
I think the last part, I know I spoke a lot today and I'm sorry, but the last thing that I would bring up is like, what does support look like? Because I think about, Chico State, we're very unique. We had the challenges of constant traumatic events happen on our campus, right? And what was it, a year and a half ago with the campfire, and what we saw was the greatness in humanity in coming together physically, right? And if every time you see a tragedy or every time you see like a racial injustice happen, you see people gathering and you say, let's hold an open forum, let's hold a vigil, let's hold a protest, let's hold a social media campaign where we all get together and we do these things. And I think the hardest part about that is we can't. How do we get together when we have to stay socially distant? And I think that's turning to these virtual platforms and being able to be creative in how we get that messaging out there, I think is probably the most important, since we cannot physically come together to say, all right, how do we do this? And we got to learn, a new platform. Whereas there's lots of folks who have been using virtual platforms for years. And I think we are just transitioning into that world at a quicker pace than we had all anticipated, right?
The type of support that I love to see is like, I guess, like standing in solidarity. Like even on just like, those like corny pictures, it's like, I stand with this, or like they have the little signs and stuff, and like it's like a collage of people.
Because it works.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It touches my heart. And Haley, she's actually putting something like that, and I'm gonna be a part of that because I love that. But I mean, I don't know. It's very hard to see, or I guess kind of like visualize what support looks like. But stuff like that, where it's just like people coming together, like in the little collages, that's awesome for me. I love that personally. But really, I just appreciate any type of support. It's just nice to see that people actually do understand that this is a real thing.
Freya, what about you? What are some things that help you feel supported?
Definitely.
Oh, Freya, my bad. I'm so sorry. I heard a car zoom and then the questions.
I definitely love knowing that there's people like you guys and like, personal connections like friends, families, understanding the whole thing. But also, as Prior said, I do like the whole thing about standing in solidarity. It just shows like no matter like what people face, like there's people who will be there for you. So just like knowing, acknowledging like that you have people behind you is like a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, those corny social medias, they like get tired of them, but then you say, you're like, oh, that's a good one. I like that picture. I like this. As much as it like people say, well, it's played out. Yeah, but it works. Like, you know, and it puts a face to the phrase, and it puts a face to the mission. And I think that's, you know, that's why I think, you know, I want to say thank you to Imani and Trevor. Like, this is incredible, you know, and giving the opportunity, the platform to say, let's hear from you all. And so if the social media, the corny social media campaigns are like what we're going to do, then, you know, that we support Haley in AS Marketing. She's been incredible in this process. And we're going to be putting some stuff out through the CCLC and the Asian Pacific Islander Council. And I think just the collection of all of these, from Diversity Affairs Council, from AS Marketing, from the CCLC, from API Council, I think all of that going out to our students, like that's how we show solidarity. And we get it out to students who both identify within the API community and who don't. For those who don't, who can stand in and as an ally with the community, you know. And I say, even though I'm the president of the council, the majority of our council are made up of folks who identify from Asian countries and heritage and lineage. And so I think being able to say, like, how do we amplify and how do we stand in solidarity with you all and with us all, right? To look at the challenges that we'll be facing.
Alrighty. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? All right. Well, if that is it, then we can conclude this conversation. And obviously, if there's any more that we need to discuss, we can always get in touch with each other. I believe I have everyone's email. So if I have questions or any answers that I can give, then I'll, you know, get in touch with you like that. And yeah, just know that, you know, and this is going to be recorded for the students, right, Trevor?
Yeah.
Okay, well, just let you all know that we support you and are here for you. As you can see, there's people here talking about what's going on, what's real, and that figuring out ways in which we can support you all during these hard times. So yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you for all.
You got it.
It's good. It's good. You're doing great.
Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you, Imani.
You're welcome. Bye.